Here are the comparison of the brand new Motorola Droid Turbo and the phone that it's essentially replacing from last year, the Motorola Droid Maxx. The Maxx came out July 2013. The Turbo has now been released in October 2014, and it is the Maxx rather was a good phone, but the Turbo is a true flagship with everything they've updated on it. The big draw with these phones, and the reason this was called the Maxx, is because of the Maxx or big huge battery that they have. The Maxx had a 3500 milliamp hour battery, and they've updated that for the Turbo all the way up to 3900 milliamp hours. It is going to be combated a little bit by the bigger, more high definition screen, but still a huge battery, the biggest I'm aware of in a phone of this size. Getting some of the basics out of the way, they both have the same operating system, Android 4.4.4 KitKat. They should both be updated to Lollipop somewhere in the near future, I would think. Colors and styles. The Maxx comes in one option, this black Kevlar. It has a nice rubberized feel to it. The Turbo comes in three options. A black and red metallized fiber, which looks, if you look at it, pretty similar to that Kevlar. However, it feels much slipperier. The Kevlar, this makes me appreciate the Kevlar. The Kevlar has a little bit of a rubbery feel to it, whereas this glass metallized fiber, it's slipperier, and I feel like it's going to be a little bit more likely to slip out of my hand, whereas this Kevlar never had a thought that it was going to slip out of my hand. The other option with it is a fiber reinforced nylon. It's black, it goes along the back here, and I hear that is pretty slippery as well. Capacity wise, this comes up to 32 gigabyte version, and the Turbo comes in both a 32 and a 64 gigabyte version. The construction of them is otherwise pretty much the same. Volume rocker and power buttons on this side with the SIM card underneath that volume rocker. On the top here, there is the headphone jack, and on the bottom here, USB charging ports. However, the Turbo has got the Turbo charger, which charges at 8 hours and 15 minutes, so another improvement with the Turbo there. This one would charge about 1.5% every 2 minutes when I was trying it. Weight-wise, I'd say they're fairly similar. The Turbo does weigh a little bit more, 6.21 ounces versus 5.89, but they feel pretty close. And if you compare the size of them, if I line up the bottoms, you can see it's just a little bit taller. And if I look at the sides, it's just a little bit wider. So fairly close in size, fairly close in weight. The Turbo does increase the size a little bit, and what you get for that is another 0.2 of inch on screen size. I have these phones both set up the same. It'll be a little bit easier to compare. If I line up the tops of the screen here, you can see down at the bottom here, here's that extra 0.2 of screen size. The screen has been vastly updated. The Maxx here, it had a 720p screen. It was 720 by 1280. And the Turbo has been updated to a Quad HD display, 1440 by 2560. The pixel count, 294 per inch on the Maxx, and they've bumped that up to 565 per inch on the Turbo, which is better than the Retina display on the iPhone. They're both AMOLED screens, but a big improvement with this Quad HD display here. I think 1080 would have been fine. It would have been a little bit easier on that battery, but phones seem to be going to these big, huge, high-definition displays, so this phone is definitely future-proof with all the stuff that's in it, this screen being one of those. Looking around the phone, on the back, cameras have been improved as well. Motorola has never been known for their quality cameras in their phones. The Droid Maxx had a 10 megapixel camera with a single flash, and that's been updated on the Turbo to a 21 megapixel camera with a dual flash. On the front, they both have a 2 megapixel front-facing camera, but that's also been moved. On the Maxx, it's a little bit over on the side here. On the Turbo, it's now more centered, so that'll be better when you're taking your selfies, that you don't have these eyes kind of pointing off to the side when people look at the camera, that you can always see. Should make that a little bit better. Video on these, the Maxx would do a 1080p, but the Turbo will do all the way up to 4K. So a vast improvement on the video recording qualities as well. Hardware on these, the processor has been improved. The Maxx had the old Motorola X8. It was a 1700 megahertz processor, and it was kind of adapted for the Maxx. People had some issues with it, but the Turbo has got the latest Snapdragon 805. There's not many phones that have it these days. I think the Note 4 has it, but not many other phones have that 805. That's definitely another area where it's going to make the phone future-proof. RAM, 2 gigs of RAM for the Maxx, and they bumped that up to 3 gigs of RAM for the Turbo. Let's have a look at the screen here. Some improvements they've done with that and the kind of overall speed. I've got these phones both set up the same launcher, same wallpaper, same everything. If I open up a web page here, you can see that the Turbo does open it up a little bit faster. And interestingly, the color rendering on the Turbo is a little bit whiter. On the Maxx, there's a little bit of a yellow cast to the white, and on the Turbo, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but the Turbo has definitely got a much more whiter picture to it. If I line the tops up here, you can see there's that extra 2 inches, or that extra 0.2 of an inch down at the bottom of the screen there. So the screen is definitely improved, and the processor definitely is. Here's an area where you can definitely tell the speed improvement. The drug program Hippocrates, I would open it in a patient's room, and I'd want to look up a drug for a patient, and this one's ready, and I'd just be standing there with my Maxx, and I'd waiting and waiting and waiting. Seemed like forever, and finally on the Maxx I could look up a drug for the patient. But you can see just how it's a big program, and you can see how much faster it is on the Turbo getting it open with that new processor. They both have active notifications, so you can see here. However, the Droid Turbo has been updated that you can wave your hand over it and it will come on. You can also wave your hand over it to silence rings. So if the phone's ringing, just wave your hand, silences it. Otherwise, I think that about covers it. The Turbo has been significantly improved from last year's Droid Maxx. It's made it into a true flagship device for Motorola and Verizon. It should be future-proof with the latest processor, the latest screen. It's just an awesome improvement that they've done with this. So if you're looking for an upgrade, check out the brand new Droid Turbo from Motorola and Verizon. They've done a great job updating it from last year's Droid Maxx.